Greetings, everyone. We are recording on Saturday, July 3rd, 2021, and I'm your host, Sean. Joining me today are co-hosts Zach.
Hey, everyone.
And Rob.
Heyo.
You're listening to episode 9 of the 4for4 podcast. This is a weekly podcast where we take a deeper dive on 4 select shows from the current anime season and discuss them in 4-episode batches, week by week. This week, we're concluding our coverage for episodes 9 through 13 of Nomad, Megalobox 2. And before we get started on our final round of discussion for the episodes of this series, a few things I want to say, a couple housekeeping items, but also just something else I want to say. This last week basically took the week off. There was kind of a confluence of events and issues that just made recording this last week unfeasible for us. Again, I know we've had some delays in the past regarding episode releases, but this is not something I want to make a pattern out of. However, in this instance, it was just kind of unavoidable. We all have our own schedules, our own issues, our own windows of time where we can do this and record this podcast. So in this instance, it just wasn't in the cards. I apologize about that. However, despite how late we're releasing this episode, I do not anticipate this impacting our release of the next episode, which will be covering To Your Eternity episodes 9 through 11. So I just wanted to say that real quick. Regarding the housekeeping items, we are approaching the end of this season, with next season being the summer. Almost everything's concluded by this point. At least the shows we're covering. Yeah, I can't think of anything else that's still airing regarding what we're covering. So with the next season, we're still deliberating on what we'll be covering. Expect to hear more on that soon. We reserve the right to basically hold out until the very end, until the very beginning of the summer season. So kind of like this last time, we may begin our first show while still not knowing, for example, what the last 2 will be. So, however, we will try to let you guys know as soon as we can on that. Any thoughts from you guys on that before we continue?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've deliberated about this enough where it's safe to say that we're set on continuing with To Your Eternity, and all 3 of us unanimously will be looking forward to the new special series coming from Madhouse, Sunny Boy, but we're still undecided.
Madhouse!
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it personally.
Shingo Matsume, man.
Yeah, the GOAT.
Not Natsume. Yeah, I always have a difficulty with his surname, but sorry, continue.
Yeah, no, all I was going to say is we're pretty set on those 2 series, but we're still at a toss-up for the other 2, but we're deliberating on it. Either way, looking forward to it. I think there's some gems in the rough that are just waiting to be uncovered for the next season, so I anticipate it.
Yeah, and we feel very decided on those 2 shows right now. Well, for To Your Eternity, largely because we began it, we feel it'd be kind of crappy to just shrug it aside after we're halfway through. So in this instance, I think we are going to continue and complete this show. But moving forward, I definitely want to give attention to the newer shows, to the things that people might not be as aware of. I have no qualms, again, about covering popular shows, but in terms of like long-running stuff, I generally don't want that to be a focus at most 2 core shows. So.
Yeah, I think it's appropriate to, what's generally popular or series with many expected sequels, like those will have its own like brandish like covering where like most people will be, generally speaking, checking it out anyways. Yeah. I feel like it's nice having consolidating 4 unique series in their own ways that will cover varying topics, which, man, hopefully the audience feels the same way. But I feel like these 4 shows that we've been discussing week by week, they can be tonally opposites of each other, but they have brought something big, each one of them. And this is our first series we're concluding today, but man, little spoiler alert, I think this might be my favorite of this batch.
I'm still deciding, but in general, I just must say in general, this season is probably the most spectacular season of anime I've seen maybe ever. I don't know. Like, that's difficult for me.
I could not immediately correct that statement. I can't off the top of my head think of a better season that had just everything ranging from emotional, like comedic, to just the things that just hit you.
I remember in 2011, the season Steins Gate was airing. There were like 5 or 6 like classic level shows airing during that season. Many mainstays that everyone knows and love were happening during that season.
Oh, I mean, you had Madoka Magica, Fate Zero. You had all of those.
Yes. And more. There's more. Like, I can't even think of all of them off the top of my head. But
well, I mean, like, no. Don't even get me started. I mean, like, we're not even covering, like, Horimiya, your Snow White Notes, which are, some honorable mentions. God, what else have I watched? Slime, moving on to the next... Mars Red, exactly. Moving on to next season, we will not be covering Beastars season 2, which is, unfortunate, but it's stuck in Netflix jail.
Yeah, and that's worthy of another discussion at some point. Netflix jail shows, or just shows in general. Platforms like Netflix that make things difficult. I don't want to say they'll never be worthy or considered. Like, many are definitely worthy, but again, it's that difficulty with the restrictiveness of its release schedule that makes it difficult.
It's just unfortunate because Beastars is GOAT. Like, it's literally like Studio Orange. I loved Land of the Lustrous. Like, absolutely adored. And I hate CG anime, but like Land of the Lustrous was impeccably done. Mm-hmm. So like when it comes to like CG, like, I'm not going to trust any other studio to do CG right but Studio Orange, because they gave us Land of the Lustrous and they gave us the first and second season, which, yes, I have VPN'd the second season of Beastars and can tell you that it is just as fantastic, if not better, than the first season, which...
Yeah. I think it's important just overall keeping that in mind, the accessibility point of view with the shows we cover, but...
Yeah,
I mean, with all that deliberation, unless you've had something you wanted prior, I think we have a lot to discuss with.
For sure.
With Megalobox.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll be discussing this way more in the coming weeks. But with that being said, I think it's about time we should get to Megalobox Nomad. So, beginning with episode 9, we see... in the intro, Joe, Bonjiri, and Santa, they're kind of making their repairs to the gym. Santa says he wants an interview with Lou, but Joe emphasizes to them that he's retired. That's basically the gist of this scene. And next we see at Abahachi's shop, him and Oicho repairing Megaloboxing gear. She states that she wants to continue her work there and keep learning from Abahachi. Next, we see Yukiko enter Sakuma's office. He has an inkling, that's my impression anyways, of what she wants to talk about. She asks about, I can't remember if it was rumors or how she got this information, but she knows that Roscoe is somehow involved with possibly licensing BES out to military contractors. And then Sakuma brings up getting battlefield data that covers all conditions and how such data can enable them to get their product onto the market much faster, referring to what I'm sure he means to be the civilian market. So Yukiko objects to this, as this was not the reason Shirado partnered with Roscoe, but Sakuma brushes her complaints aside as Ernest wishes the soldiers who want to serve their nation again as being a completely legit reason for distributing this to the military from the battlefield. So Yukiko wants undisclosed MAC data, while Sakuma acknowledges the BES chip rumors, is my takeaway. So she states at the end, cutting ties with Roscoe would cause a huge financial loss for Shirado, and that's why she has to be very careful with how she maneuvers this situation. It's bit of mouthful, but real quick, any quick thoughts from you guys on this scene?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. I'll start. Now there's a plot with Joe and the B plot with the like Mac Rosario, Sakuma, Bess,
Yes.
like all that jazz.
Yes.
There's a lot to take in here, and I feel like deliberating on it too much will kind of take focus away from most of what this episode's trying to showcase. But no, it is important that we see this distrust, like these seeds of distrust, immediately being sown when Shirato has reasons to doubt how the best technology will be used. And obviously Sakuma is like fully prepared to go gung-ho for having these military contracts used for it. And I love their opposing ideologies of how they see its use on people, because like Sakuma is trying to play the more heroic side of this argument. Like this is a rehabilitation for those who are willing to die and serve their country.
Sorry, Rob, I'll give you your time to speak, but I just wanted to say real quick. One of the main themes of this season, to me at least, it's very obvious, is about growth and seeing how these characters have grown from the first season to this one. And it's not just Joe, like we see how all these characters have grown from the first season, and that includes even characters like Yukiko. So one of her main takeaways from the first season was realizing how her technology, how Shirato's technology was being used at the expense of others. And
well, that's exactly what I wanted to kind of touch base on, is like,
yeah,
she has had great character development from season 1 to season 2, right? Like, season 1, she was kind of like not really the antagonist, but like she wasn't a good person in season 1. No. Season 2, you can see her trying to better herself. She knows what's going on with Roscoe and wants nothing to do with the military.
Because originally in the first season, Shirato was involved in military contracts, but I mean, we can easily infer that the outcome with Joe and Yuri like really impacted her view on the world. Like, because we came to learn after that Shirato cut ties with the military and purely went into the medical field. And of course, as we'll learn, this impacted their finances quite badly, but it was a moral and ethical decision on their part. I guess all I wanted to say was Sakuma is the consummate capitalist who just, he just wants to get ahead at all costs. Yukiko has her ideals that she's not willing to compromise.
She's taking the moral high ground.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Rob.
So, yes, there's just one particular scene that I kind of want to draw attention to, is where that fucking snake is sitting there self-aggrandizing himself while he's looking out the window, and you can see in his reflection that the reflection belies his true intentions, where he's sitting there spewing this nonsense, which I think Yukiko picks up on. But it's all just words, because you can see in his reflection where his face is actually perturbed, like his mask slipped at that point and he was actually kind of pissed off, but his back was turned, so like Yukiko could not see that, but us as an audience are keyed in on to the point where he's actually kind of getting like pushed against the corner here, and he's not very happy about that, because you know about his character that he's not used to having been told no or having any sort of defiance. It's all about
he needs control.
Yes.
He needs to like have some leverage.
Yep, definitely. And we'll for sure have way more opportunities to talk about Sakuma and Yukiko, but yeah, we need to move on. So next scene, we see Yuri lamenting over Liu's situation before cutting to Liu himself talking to Joe. And, he says he's in pain and grief over the fact that he'll always have partial paralysis at the very least, even after physical therapy. That's what the doctors are saying. But he is resolved to not give up, even in this situation. and he says he'll never give up on the dream or himself lest he ends up hating himself. That's his resolution. So next we cut to the drunk monk. We finally see Sachio apparently winning a match. That's how I remember it anyways. But after this, Aragaki approaches Sachio with a letter in hand, but Sachio states he's not leaving the ring. And we kind of get a glimpse of the letter that's from the D21 Engineering Support Association. Abagaki says to him that Joe has been serious about repairing the gym and that he's convinced about Joe. But Sachio brushes this off as Joe seeking forgiveness when he feels in his mind that, like, I'm not going to give him forgiveness. He's done nothing to earn forgiveness. But we'll get more to that later. Next, we see Joe stop by Nanbu's grave yet again with Sachio also coming there. They're both in the rain. Sachio reiterates that the past can't be changed, but Joe states all he wants to do is see the lights in the place go on again. And then we have a flashback of Nanbu from Sachio having another painful episode, while he had cancer. And he says to not tell Joe about this as he's not as confident as you think, and says to Sachio that Joe's afraid of the lights going out and that he's just like you. He wants to do nothing more than protect all of you. So I'll take a moment there to pause. Any thoughts on these prior scenes from you guys?
It gives a lot of context to Sachio. And I guess I can sympathize with Sachio, but he's always come off to me as an asshole, the one that chased Joe away.
Definitely being an ass in this situation, for sure.
Pops just straight up told him, look, Joe's doing this for me. He's doing this for you. He's doing this for the dream of Jim Nowhere. And he still turned Sachio was the first person to turn his back on that dream and kick it out. So, I don't know, Sachio just kind of rubs me the wrong way. I understand where he's coming from, and I do sympathize with that. But at the same point, he was a fucking dick. And he still kind of is.
Yeah. Pretty much agreed. I don't fault so much to Sachio when he was much younger. I kind of am faulting him now, though. But as we'll see in the later episodes, there's just a bit more to it. That one of the things I love about this show is the writing is so strong and confident in itself that in the end, even if you're not quite on board with what it's going for in the moment, just about always I feel this show delivers in the end. So I think it really does in Sachio's regard. So I guess so too. Yeah, I think that's all I'll say about that. But no, I really love the scene with Liu. I want to say it that way, but it's difficult. But no, I love how Liu is I feel like every character has some spiel at some point about how Joe is he represents everyone's dreams, but I think of any single character in the show except maybe Mac, I feel like Liu is the person that most embodies this idea that Joe is this person that motivated this other person to just go completely beyond what they ever felt like they were capable of. So
Joe was the sole reason that he went to Yuri. It was a great bonding moment for him and Yuri. Mm-hmm. Was Joe's being the inspiration for him to become a megaloboxer.
Yeah, and the weird roundabout thing is and Joe was also that inspiration to Yuri, which is weird when you consider it, but it was that inspiration Joe that he gave to you that in turn maybe that's what he saw in Yuri. And yeah, it's all very roundabout, but as we see time and again, Joe is the dream. He is the person that inspires literally everyone else in this series. So no, the way you expressed it though was awesome. I just love that small scene. But
I did too. I don't think we can ever do it justice, because we have to address so many scene by scene interactions and moments, but there will be no substitute for just watching it yourself And I can't stress that enough. I love so much about this series, and we have to cover it briskly, but no, the scene that Sean is referring to it's worth a watch in isolation. It's very inspiring.
Yeah. All right. But as you said, time. So next, we see Mac rewatching the match between himself and Liu, with his son saying he looks scary the moment he beats Mac. This clearly troubles him, so he turns it off. He says, it's time to go to bed. I'll read you the storybook. And then this is where we get to kind of the meat and potatoes of that motif we've been talking about for the last 8 episodes. So next we see Mac reading the story book, so like the children's book of The Hummingbird and the Nomad to his son, and finally explaining what this motif actually means. So it's a story about a nomad who's on a journey to die, but is followed by a hummingbird who wants to sing its song. The nomad wants to be left alone, but the hummingbird refuses, saying, "If I can make you lie, you must listen to my song." And the nomad agrees to this challenge. So the nomad states he wants to die because he lost everything, but the hummingbird calls this out as a lie. After the nomad recounts his losses to the hummingbird, which are his home, his fortune, his family dying from illness, the nomad states he has nothing left. But the hummingbird says, "You still have eyes to see me and ears to hear my song." And this is where the nomad relents, admitting defeat. So all of this is occurring to the imagery of Joe Abagaki and the orphans saving the gem from this typhoon, as we saw at the end of the prior episode, the typhoon bearing in on the city. It's all really expertly played against that sequence. So the voiceover from Mac as he's reading the story to his son, they're all trying to save the gem together. And then Oicho shows up and helps them get the final tarp on. It's really great stuff. So next we see the orphans and Abagaki discuss Sachio's circumstances in the last several years and learn that Abahachi had an engineer friend write up a letter of recommendation for Sachio, but won't take it. He keeps fighting in the ring in hopes of protecting Jim Nowhere. So that's what the letter was that Abagaki tried giving Sachio. Apparently they keep offering the letter to him. Before I get to the final scene, really quick, any thoughts on this storybook and what happened during the typhoon?
I thought it was really touching with the typhoon.
Yeah. No, I want to save most of my feelings for the storybook with its middle and ending parts. But no, this is a great portion. I love it.
Yeah. So next we see Sakuma from Roscoe Tower yawning as he states Mikio is trying to close the way to the future with such trivial morality, referring to his thesis that was just recently published on BES. And he says to the head of the developmental department, who he come to learn her name is Tomoka Yoshimura, that if the thesis spreads, Mac's product value will go down as well as Roscoe's stock. And I love how he just refers to Mac as product value, like he is a product. So he wants her to go to the university and show him who's boss, in his words, after stating that Roscoe has given the university many donations over the past years. She agrees to this, and he tells her to send Kiko Mac's undisclosed data just to make the usual tweaks. So Sakuma meets with Mac, telling him that Mac's telling Sakuma that he's had difficulty sleeping and memory problems, that he barely remembers his last match. Sakuma writes this off as nerves. Mac is afraid what will happen the next time he enters the ring and what he'll do without realizing it. So he states he's not sure if he has the reason to fight anymore, as his reason for facing Liu was for his son to see him in that ring. This surprises Sakuma because he's like, oh wait, I haven't milked this for all it's worth yet. So Sakuma picks at Mac's inspiration in Joe and why he even attempted megaloboxing again in the first place. He puts the idea in his head to
Here's
challenge
the snake
Joe to a
fucking
match.
weaseling his way in.
Yeah.
The chip isn't the only thing stuck in Mac's head.
No, definitely not. And at the very end, we see Joe in the morning after the typhoon looking over Jim Nowhere, and then we see the newspaper land at the foot of Bonjiri's restaurant of Mac's challenge to Joe being distributed, which kind of leads us into the final stretch of the story. So this ends episode 9. Real quick, any thoughts on this episode?
Well, if it wasn't blatantly obvious, if it wasn't blatantly obvious by Sakuma dancing at the end of the last episode, yeah, there's clearly like nefarious scheming going on. Just make the usual tweaks. Oh yeah, you know that motherfucker's got dark, dirty secrets he's hiding from the public.
Yeah, like I always interpreted his little dance as like his way of dealing with stress, I guess, or like I don't know, but every scene he's in, he just exudes this callous disregard for the lives he's trampling on. Everything's a pawn, everything's a part of an equation, all towards his own ambitions for what he touts as the future. But really,
well, he definitely operates as the ends justify the means kind of mentality.
Okay, so he's one of the only characters that has not been affected by Joe's like dream or
he's completely
inspiration of hope.
Like he lives on a different plane of reality. Like
exactly. So he's the only character in this series that is not affected by Joe's, inspiration of hope.
But ironically, hope is what he peddles. That's always what's in his spiel.
He's a snake oils man.
Yeah. He knows what motivates the masses, but he has no connection to the masses. He has no real sympathy for the masses. He only has ambition and his own vision of the future. He represents the archetypical technocrat billionaire. So, yeah, I guess that's what I wanted to say on his character, and we'll have plenty more again to say about Sakuma going forward. But I think we need to move on to episode 10.
I've got a nickname for him. It's called Sakuma.
Nice.
Suck him a big toe.
All right. So next, episode 10, we open up to some Megalobox pundits talking about the challenge Mac has made to Joe, with a scene of Sakuma on television giving the reasoning behind Mac's challenge to the public. Santa approaches...
I fucking hate his face.
Santa approaches Joe, asking him about it, though he writes it off as probably some sort of mistake. He expresses disinterest as he continues repairing Jim Nowhere. So he later takes a look at the paper. So after the opening sequence, he takes a look at the paper while concerningly looking at the tattered state of the gym. Despite its repairs, that's kind of where I got in my head. Well, maybe he might think about taking up this match to get some money for repairs. So next we see a board of executives meeting at Shirado, with them praising Sakuma's handling of the situation with Mikio's thesis. Yukiko states that they can't write it off as mere rumors, but they counter that the data they've been continuously given by Sakuma has shown nothing of concern. So Asamoto, the woman who's Yukiko's right hand, we always see her with Yukiko in this series, she states that they should rethink their dealings with Roscoe, as there were obvious intentions to make military contracts utilizing BES. Yukiko agrees, stating Shirado had just recently made its shift to the medical field, and that partnering with a company whose focus is on military contracts conflicts with their image. So this distresses the board, saying that their value will go down 50% without Roscoe.
Typical fucking corpos.
So Yukiko states that this is true in the short term, before being interrupted and told her decision to stop development of military gears and subsequent loss of those military contracts had already once put Shirado through a financial crisis, and that Roscoe more or less saved the company from insolvency. So Yukiko, as CEO, is backed into a corner by this. She can't really make any moves She cannot feasibly cut ties with Roscoe without the risk of destroying the company. And as loath as I am to say, I mean, she's the head of this board of executives. Like, that's correct. When you are in that position, your sole prerogative, like your driving purpose is profit. It's for the longevity of the company, and that means more profits. When you are in that room, ethics takes the back seat almost always. Like, that's just the nature of the biz.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Like, you are reporting to your shareholders, your imperative is more money. So despite her ethical concerns, despite that she's actually saying the right thing, despite the fact that she's being the conscience in this situation. Next, we see Tomoka, so who I would describe as Sakuma's right hand. Tomoka arrives at the university after Mikio is finishing a lecture to request that he retract his claims regarding BES that he made in his thesis, and she threatens legal action on Roscoe's behalf. So Tomoka states that Roscoe has always had a good relationship with this university and that it would be a shame if this ruined it. So Mikio says it's been 5 years since he read her gear engineering outline and brings up what she said about all the equipment breaking eventually and what developers must do after they break, and says that he fails to see how BES is any exception in this regard. And she says she's surprised that he remembers her, but he counters, well, you're one of my first students when I started lecturing at this university. But she gives him a spiel on what it means to move forward or toward the future. And he ends the exchange by saying, well, the moment you stop realizing you've made a mistake is also taking a step toward the future. So before moving forward, I know it's two big scenes, but what are you guys' thoughts on them?
I think they speak for themselves for the most part. This interaction with Mikio and Tomoka has probably the most consequence in the final episode, but
Agreed.
I think it serves a great importance. But I think this is more of a case where it's much easier to experience it, and explaining it kind of.
It reveals a lot about Tomoka's character. It shows that despite that she's the right hand of, or maybe not the actual right hand, but for the purposes of the show, she's head of development for BS as far as I remember.
She's constantly at Sakuma's ear. So
and I like how Tomoka tries to brush it off as like naivety, like, oh well, when I was here 5 years ago I was naive and I didn't understand how the world worked. And it's just like Miko at the same point was like, no, you weren't naive. Like, you were striving on the right path and you strayed.
Yeah, she's just been corrupted by the system.
Right, by the corpos. And you can kind of see her taken aback by that in that scene. And I think that's kind of a really important point to look at.
Well, she like sours her face. Like, it hasn't gone away. Her conscience knows what the right thing to do is.
Not only does she sour her face, but she sees herself in the seats as a younger person waving at her. So it's definitely hard caught on her conscience, shown by the director,
Yeah, and just in this not small, but this scene alone, we see these two characters. Mikio's clearly grown from the last season, and we see it even in her, even now, despite how little time we've had with her. We see how Joe's impact on Mikio is in turn impacting her. We see the dominoes happening all over the place, involving people who are only extremely nominally related to Joe in any way. But we see how his legacy impacts these people and in turn impact other people. So I love that about this scene. I love that about this series in general. But
like any party, whether it immediately or directly involved with Joe, like, there's a cascading effect of his inspiration, his legacy inspires others. Those people in turn inspire others themselves.
Yeah, exactly. So next, we see Joe in the hospital run into Mac. Both of them are surprised to see one another, with Mac having just visited Ryu, worried about his condition. He introduces his wife Maya and his son Miguel. He brings up Miguel's miracle, and Joe notices the book he's holding, knowing of the story of the hummingbird. And by miracle, I meant when he was younger, when he had an operation that saved his life. So Joe wants to know why Mac chose him, and he states that Joe will always be a champion to him, and that he's still living the dream that Joe showed him. So similar to Ryu in that regard. So Ryu says afterwards that Joe will fight Mac, as it would be an insult to run from Mac but still fight Ryu, because Joe ultimately did say, I will fight with you, you know. So
right, like it's kind of vain keeping the promise to Liu and oppose fighting Mac.
Exactly.
When they're doing it ultimately for the same reason. For
sure. And this is, to me, what sealed the deal with will they, won't they? I'm like, well, of course they will after this. So we see Joe once again visiting Nanbu's grave, remembering his final conversation with Nanbu. Those kids will someday understand you. And I believe this is the day before he actually did his exhibition match with Ryu. So this is near the very end. And Abagaki in the scene interrogates Joe's real reason for accepting the exhibition match with Ryu, stating it wasn't to pay for Nanbu's medical expenses, was it? And this is where Joe reveals the real reason was to give Jim Nowhere hope after Nanbu died, though this obviously failed spectacularly. He figured the next best thing he could do was just disappear so that the kids could move forward again, though he acknowledges that he was clearly wrong here and that he should have stayed there no matter what. Abagaki says fighting Mac again to reclaim the light is just hubris, and that will be a repeat of what happened years ago. But Joe recounts his time with Chief and the dream he showed him, and he says that Mac reminds him of Chief. Santa then runs up to them and tells them of an official offer from Roscoe. But before we get to the next scene, any quick thoughts on this? Because
you better start, Rob, because man, I have I just think feelings about this one.
I just think that it's incredulous that like Joe got quote unquote, you know, offered this fight prior to any sort of official thing. Like it was hitting the news prior to any sort of like, hey Joe, do you actually want to do this?
Well, this is much more Sakuma's approach. By making it public, it puts fire under Joe's feet, you know. Like,
and you know, it's the same thing that Chief said to Joe about still living the dream. It's all about the dream, and you know, Liu even warns Joe to be careful, and I'm kind of at this point like inclined to believe, you know, Liu, like let's be careful here because things are kind of like spiraling out of Joe's control. Like Joe just wanted to come back and rebuild Jim Nowhere. Yes, he still wants to fight, but like it's just like all of a sudden right on his doorstep.
Man, I don't know if I agree with that viewpoint, Rob, because to me this is Joe finally getting his footing. Like he lost sight of what was truly important and ran away when he should have stayed there the most. But because of Chief's influence, he's like Mac reminds me of Chief.
Rebuild the family. Like that's his main goal.
I feel like this fight with Mac only cements his, like, he's going to hold on to his dream. Like this is the end goal for him now. This fight is more about is not about the end result of the fight, but what comes after. Because now he's here to stay for Team Nowhere.
I don't think that's his ultimate goal is fighting. I think that the ultimate goal is to rebuild his family, and this match has really nothing to do with that, and it's just kind of thrown on his lap, and we get to know that Joe is really a narcissistic kind of like selfish individual. So like his pride's not going to let him say no, but at the same point, like this is not what he's here for. We're not, and as an audience, this is not what we're here for. We're not here for the fights. We're here to see how Joe is progressing throughout life and how he's, you know, digging himself out from this pit.
So I'm glad you guys both brought up your differing perspectives on that. I both agree and disagree with both of you. I'm going to have to leave it infuriatingly vague for now, though, because we're definitely going to get way more into that later. But I'm glad you guys went into that. So next, we see Jimmy at Yuri's gym. telling Joe and Santa that he was contacted as the acting representative for Team Nowhere, because my guess is Roscoe's like, we have no idea where Joe lives or anyone else he's associated with. So who's the closest guy? Yuri. So we'll just contact his gym. So anyways, he's contacted as the acting representative, and he asks Joe what he thinks about it. Yuri implores Joe not to go through with it, saying he's tired of Joe's vain heroism and that he's no match for Mac. So kind of going along lines with what you said, Rob, like Yuri's just seeing him as the typical narcissist who just wants to feed his urge to fight. But then Joe says, that's not it. I've always fought for myself. That's how it's always been, and that's how it always will be. Again, kind of going off your perspective there. So next, we see Santa, Oicho, and Bonjiri at the restaurant, all talking about possible rematch, if there's anything they can do to help, like the good old days. But Oicho wants to know if Sachio is aware of this. And then we cut to Sachio reading about the fight, clearly infuriated. And next, seeing Ryu talk with Yuri, saying that he knows Joe will take on the fight and wants Yuri to support him. Yuri says Joe doesn't matter anymore. I came back to Megaloboxing to support you. But Ryu says he has that Yuri just has a chip on his shoulder for the way Ryu ended up, and says he's in this state purely by his own choice. And by the way, never forget, you didn't choose me, I chose you. And we see a flashback of Ryu meeting Yuri like at his home, I believe, on the beach. And this is where he's reminded of the first time Joe challenged him out on that dark street, forming a clear parallel in his mind and what motivated Yuri to fight him. So, real quick before I move on to the end of the episode, any quick thoughts on these last couple scenes? I went through them very quick.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, Liu is giving Yuri those same eyes that Joe did on that street, that same resolve, like, show me what real megaloboxing is, not just some person beating on each other. So, like, it was a really nice, like, juxtaposition between, like, Joe and Liu having that same drive. Like, I want a true fight. I don't just want some brutal, like, I'm just going to beat on you to beat on you, like,
they put their souls on the line. Their souls and bodies. They put everything into it. Yeah. No, I agree. So next, we see Sachio still training at the Drunk Monk with Fujimaki watching over him. And he asks how long Sachio's been there. Sachio says 6 months. And then he asks why he fights. And Sachio replies, well, it's just for money. And then Fujimaki is like, well, I can have that prepared immediately, but you're going to have to fight for me and fix matches until you die. And then we see Sachio start considering this, and then Joe comes in at the perfect dramatic timing, saying he wants to fight Mac and that he wants Sachio's support. Abagaki comes to Joe's side and finally asks Sachio why he wanted to learn Megaloboxing in the first place. And this is where he said, you should have your own path. Sachio responds, and well, that's right here. I've made up my mind. Fujimaki steps up and says they should settle it in the ring, putting what's most important to them on the line. Joe responds, our home. If you win, I'll leave and never come back. If I win, though, then you leave the ring. Sachio accepts this. And predictably, Sachio gets the shit beat out of him. He tells Joe to stop being so selfish after being asked to stop. So Joe responds that he is selfish and that he is the one who chose to fight Ryu and that he is the one who abandoned them, so it is not your fault.
Well, the only way to break Sachio out of his own self-loathing is through blood, I feel like. Sachio wasn't going to listen to any sort of reason, any sort of talk. It was all about, like, I need to step in the ring with this kid. And, I mean, like, Joe didn't show any fucking mercy. Like, he didn't hold back. He beat the fuck out of him.
It's not really just the physical violence. I feel it's the combination. Sachio needed that catharsis, both physically and mentally. But really, it is not the beatdown that got to him. It's Joe's words. Like, he's saying, it's not your fault. I'm the one who made these decisions. I'm the one who made these mistakes. Because as much of as a jerk-ass Sachio's been, Joe is the one who made those mistakes. He is the one that
I
made
mean,
those
he was the
decisions.
adult. He chose to leave, but like it was still influenced by Sachio.
Well, right,
because
in Sachio's point of view, he's the reason Joe left because of his words, and he feels he shoulders the responsibility of everything that everything that happened afterwards.
He's caught in a vicious cycle of self-destruction where, on one hand, he can't forgive Joe for what he did, but on the other hand, he thoroughly blames himself for the entire situation. So he's literally lashing out and harming everyone he cares about. Joe, in this instance, in this moment, he relieves him of that burden. I thought it was a beautiful moment. Like, it's the perfect cathartic
me too.
moment.
It's one of my favorites of this whole season.
Yeah.
Oh, when Joe said, "Let's go home," I definitely did not cry.
Yeah. It's as you say. Sachio tries getting in that final hit, asking why he abandoned them, but Joe, rather than countering, gives him a dramatic embrace, saying, "Let's go home, Sachio." Perfect end to that entire scene. And then Fujimaki, being the ridiculous individual he is just already at the bar pouring himself and Nanbu a drink, saying, "That kid's nothing but trouble, but I got him where he needs to be." And
right?
Yeah, again, I said it before, but he's just the most heightened. He's perfect for the story, but he's just the most unbelievable character in this show. I love it though. No, he's perfect for this show though. So, and then we end the episode. Abagaki and Joe are saying we'll meet you out front to Sachio, and then Joe's vision goes blurry and he collapses. So that's where we leave off the end of the episode for 10.
I remember watching this on the airing day of it. I was like, wait. Is this really how it ends? I have to wait a week for this shit? No.
Yeah. I mean, it was rough. I mean, I knew there was a few episodes left, so I'm like, he still has a fight. It's probably not that big of a deal, but
I was worried they were going the Ashita no Joe route as soon as this dropped. I'm like, oh no.
Yeah.
Definitely a death flag. Definitely.
For sure. No, it definitely tells you, oh wait, there's going to be major complications going forward. It's not going to be a simple matter of, just who beats the shit out of each other harder. No, Joe's suffering long-term repercussions for his past.
Yep, and as we'll see in this next episode, he's not the only one.
No, definitely not. But before we get to the next episode, let's take a quick break. So take a moment to go to the restroom, get a drink. We'll be right back. And we're back. So next we have the opening scene with Joe remembering a conversation with Chief back when he was training Chief for his upcoming matches. He's being asked why he donned the gear as Nomad. So why did Joe suddenly go from Gearless Joe to Geared Joe, basically? So he says, "Gearless Joe didn't just belong to me. When I donned my gear, I could become someone else," was his reasoning. So Chief responds, "So the opposite of me. I donned my gear to become closer to my son Carlos, who in turn made Chief's gear." So I know this is the pre-credit scene, but real quick, I think it warrants a minor discussion on its own. What do you guys think of this?
There's so much subtext to this. It's not even a very long scene, but gosh, I miss Chief.
Right? Yeah. Can we stop?
So inspirational,
Chief, please. It still hurts. It's still raw.
One of our biggest concerns earlier in the show was how Chief's legacy would affect Joe going forward, and it seems like this where I feel completely vindicated. This should have never been a concern in the first place. The callbacks are frequent, his impact is always acknowledged, and the way how the story goes about illustrating that impact is always this. It's always the most powerful at the best moment, I guess is what I want to say.
Yeah, and I love the line that I think stuck with Joe and is on the forefront of his mind. What he says, "But if you lose your self-esteem, you can't live your tomorrow."
for sure.
And it's something he needed to hear. Like, there'll definitely be a day when you get back into that ring, and I feel like, oh man, so many emotions. I have to move on.
Yeah. So after the opening, we see a scene with in the hospital. So the doctors say there's nothing seriously wrong with Joe, but that he's still suffering from the effects of living his life as Nomad for years. He says there's not a single boxer who doesn't have some brain damage, and that one of Joe's minor conditions could lead to one that eventually causes death. So this is something that he must be aware of. He must be very careful if he is to go on boxing. But rather, he just shouldn't go on boxing is what's really being said here. But alas. So Oicho meets up with Santa, Bonjiri, and Abagaki, who are all by Joe's side. With Oicho shocked to learn about his painkiller addiction, Joe promises to not hide anything or betray them ever again, and says that gym repairs will be done soon and wants them all to come by for a celebration when it is done. I know Santa brought up before Oicho got there, maybe he's suffering from punch-drunk syndrome, which is very bad, but it's looking like it's not that serious. So, I mean, that was a relief to see and hear. But that...
I mean...
Yeah.
Not that serious, but he's still in the hospital.
Oh, yeah.
So, you know.
I mean, the doctor's saying, nothing's major right now, but, one thing could lead to another, and you could very easily see yourself in a life-threatening situation if you get back out there and do this shit. So,
well, it's like, this is just a warning, hey, this is a precursor to this being terminal. Like,
yeah. Like,
you can't let this continue.
No. But next, we see Asamoto visiting Maya, bringing up the thesis about BES, and says if there's even the slightest chance Mac is suffering from the hypothetical effects described in the thesis, then she wants to know, as Shirado would be partially responsible due to having a hand in its production. And once again, Asamoto is who I describe as Yukiko's right hand assistant, and Maya is Mac's wife. So just a quick clarification on that point. Maya lies about Mac's condition, saying that nothing's been out of the ordinary with Mac. And then Asamoto says this is fortunate and brings up real quick Miguel's transplant surgery in the past, saying it was miraculous locating a donor at the last minute. And this causes Maya to have a troubled look on her face that Asamoto quickly picks up on. So it's clear to see that, this is a very intentional question to put Maya on the spot in. She wanted to read her expression when bringing that up. So next scene, we see Yukiko giving a speech regarding the goals of Shirado Healthcare Foundation and how better medical infrastructure for war-torn areas where the military is recently withdrawn from. So she says better medical infrastructure leads to better infrastructure overall in affected areas. And I say that in air quotes. So Yukiko speaks with Asamoto and suspects the circumstances behind Miguel's surgery because, of course, Asamoto relays to Yukiko her expression, how she took what she said on that. And then, surprise, surprise, Sakuma makes a arrival to the party to throw Yukiko off her game and says, he's surprised that she's using spy tactics against him. He somehow knows she's making moves against him. And really, that's it with that scene. So these last two scenes, any thoughts from you guys?
Just another reminder that Sakuma's a cunt. Otherwise, yeah,
yep.
There's more implications that go on after this, but I think it speaks for itself.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's good that Yukiko wants, again, she's reaffirming wanting nothing to do with this shit. So, again, it's just reaffirming her character development, where she's like, I've washed my hands of this shit, and I have literally nothing that I want to do with this shit. And Sakuma, as I like to call him, continues to just go on his tirade. God damn it, I hate that motherfucker so much.
Yeah.
So much. Like, and it's not even like okay, so like he is turning into an antagonist, and it's not like even he's like the great
antagonist.
Right,
yeah.
like the best, like threatening, like he's not threatening, but goddamn, does this story just not give you so many reasons to fucking hate him.
Yup, definitely. I do agree, though. I mean, these scenes do show Yukiko's growth. Next, everyone gathers at Gym Nowhere, decorated in flowers like the town casa that Chief was a part of did during its festival. And everyone gathers at the table while Joe begins to tell his story during the last 5 years when he lived as Nomad. So Sachio's sitting near the entrance, not completely letting himself be a part of the festivities, but he's listening in. So Joe describes himself as drifting town to town, losing all track of time, saying to himself he'll go home the next day, but then he keeps falling deeper into the pit of painkillers and pointless fighting, telling himself that it's all for pops, but he went through this for years and years until it just became one day after another, like he's just living to die at that point. But then he met Chief, and he says the reason he was able to get off the drugs and come back was because of Chief, as we, the audience, well know by this point. So we see Yuri arrive to hear Joe say, I took on that match with you without talking to you guys first. Of course I was going to lose. And then he says he knows his next match is going to be his final one and asks all of them if he should even participate. Yet again, another exhibition of growth from Joe. He's not going to just take this match with Mac because he wants to. It's beyond simply his decision at this point. He knows that if he's going to be a part of this family he's made for himself, that he needs to ask them. So
right, this is such a powerful like growth moment with Joe. Like he wants the consent of his family, like to go forward with this decision, including Sachio. I think this was another great scene.
Right, it's so different from how he was with the Liu fight. Like it's absolute growth with the character, and I mean, again, I love seeing the family back together.
Exactly.
It's such like a heartwarming, like just expertly conceived scene where it's just like you feel like you're there, you're part of that family, right?
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Next, we see Bonjiri object. So these are the answers. So Bonjiri objects, saying he doesn't want Joe to die. Plain cut, simple. Santa, of course he wants him to. That's a great scoop. That's great material for his job. But Oicho says she's fine with whatever decision Joe makes. And then Sachio states he still hasn't, nor probably ever will, forgive Joe, but has decided he will live his life to the fullest, and that his terms are that he's fine with Joe accepting, but he will be the one to throw in the towel whenever he feels it's necessary. Those are his terms, and Joe is fine with this. So
it's a fair point. Yeah. You know, he doesn't want to lose any more family, so
exactly.
I get it.
Exactly. And if Joe is truly serious about making everything better again and trying to reforge his familial connections with all of them, then he will make this concession. Like, it should be a no-brainer. So Joe reveals his decision to don Chief's gear, who his son made to protect him. And then he says, I want to wear this gear so I can live the rest of my life with all of you. So the match is now official, being revealed to the public. We see Mac training for his next match, with Tomoka and Sakuma looking down on him. Tomoka states as readings are reaching dangerous levels sooner and sooner, with Sakuma's response being, well, and? He brushes aside her concerns and tells her that they just need to concentrate on his performance, just adjust the numbers to the usual levels. Any thoughts on the end of that scene with Joe? And
so yes, I'm so glad that Joe's going to be fighting in Chief's gear. I mean, we all knew it was coming, but it's still a fantastic emotional payoff.
Admittedly, I didn't see it coming, but I think it was a nice, like, wholesome surprise, and I think it just even narratively it serves a great purpose. I mean, it's perfect to resemble his growth.
It's well earned too, because
yes, it feels earned.
I mean, we've seen Joe come back after 5 years to everyone's either dismissal up to abject hatred and hostility. But I mean, he's he's walked the walk. He's been rebuilding the gym. He saved Bonjiri's restaurant. He's done everything he can to exhibit, his remorse for what he did. And I'm gonna say way more about my ultimate feelings and what this series means at the end. But Joe's gone an incredibly long way towards redeeming himself, is I guess what I'll say with that. But I'll have way more to say at the end.
Well, again, like I said, it's a great emotional payoff. Definitely. Joe saying that he's going to use Chief's armor, like I said at the beginning of this episode, like, man, can we stop with these flashbacks to Chief, please? Like, it still hurts. It's still raw to me, and the point that Joe's like, yeah, I'm going to be using Chief's gear, and I'm just like, yes, thank you.
So, getting into the last scenes of the episode, we see Miguel, Mac's son, crying with the hummingbird book torn to pieces on the ground. Mac doesn't remember doing it, but we see Maya saying he's done it countless times now, or at least things similar to that. Maya reveals to Mac in private that Mac may have been able to recover fully without BES, but consented to let Sakuma and Roscoe make the implants in exchange for saving Miguel. And next we see Mac meet with Sakuma and acknowledge the truth.
Go
ahead.
I just want to spit. Like,
be a little more specific.
We haven't even gone to the part where Miguel tells his father to go away. Like, that hurt.
Right. Well, Sakuma is sitting there, like, literally taking advantage of that shit, and he knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
And god damn it just hurts because, like, it's not like we can't not empathize with Mac, because as we've been saying throughout this entire series from Megalobox, like, we're all under the impression that Mac is a legitimately good person.
For sure.
And he's still legitimately a good person, but some of this behavior is out of his control due to the BES. So, god damn it, it just sucks. And this piece of shit, Sakuma, knows that it's defective, but is still allowing to or willing to risk Mac's life and, well-being and his family's well-being for a fucking profit, because we all know that that's what he's in and about. And it just sucks because Mac is legitimately a good person that I really, really resonate with Mac, and that's what's great about Megalobox as a series in full. Like, even in season 1, like, you still resonated with the quote-unquote, like, villains or antagonists because they weren't particularly evil like we get with Sakuma. Like, Sakuma's evil 100%. But with, like, other antagonists, they're not necessarily evil. Like, they've got their own background, which, the story went out of its way to flesh out and make you still really kind of want to root for them, despite Joe being the protagonist of the series. Like, despite Joe being the protagonist, like, you still want to root for the quote-unquote antagonist. And I'm using, quotes very loosely because every person that we've had Joe fight has been a very compelling character, even throughout season 1. And even throughout season 2, like, are still, like, they carry on that theme of just very compelling characters where, like, I wouldn't necessarily mind if they lost, but I wouldn't also necessarily mind if they won, because like, they're still good people, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some mooks in season 1, but by and large, like, anyone who's major to the plot, I agree for sure. But moving into the end of this episode, he does meet with Sakuma and he acknowledges the truth of Mikio's thesis. He tells Sakuma what he just learned and is met with, "I figured Maya would have told you even sooner." Like, he's nonplussed by this. Max, understandably infuriated, and grabs Sakuma, but says he's grown to be a hero and icon. This is Sakuma saying this to Mac. Rising to the top of the Megalobox world, achieving something he never could have without BES. Max
I'm sitting here through this scene like, punch him, do it, please do it.
So Max says it's all lies, but Sakuma says he never anticipated Mac time. And Also says that Miguel only lives because he took part in the program, which is objectively true, sorry to say. Next, we see a montage of the story's cast as the story of the hummingbird and Nomad is narrated to the audience, as the final shot shows Mac walking away from the camera down a city road. I think the feelings have been laid bare on that last scene with Sakuma, but any thoughts on the episode as a whole before we move on to the next?
Punch him, do it, strangle him, throw him out a window, please. Do something to that piece of shit.
A lot of the good feels in the beginning, a lot of the I hate this guy feels towards the end, but as a whole, I mean, it's a strong episode of any series if it gets you from both wild, like emotional peaks.
From one end to the other, for sure.
Yeah, it's a great one. I love I think there's an emotional, I agree with Rob. There's an emotional payoff.
It's just emotion. Like, that's the key word with this show. It's really good at evoking those powerful emotions. So
absolutely.
And the reason is, it's all earned. It's all thoroughly earned. So let's move on to episode 12. We open to Mac looking at the screen in the city square with awe, watching the legendary match between Yuri and Joe, as he once again tells the story of the hummingbird and Nomad to himself. So cut back to the future, to the present time. Him walking down a street, deep in drink, continuing to repeat the story to himself and reflect on the revelations of the prior episode. He finally falls over in an alleyway, throwing his bottle at a poster of himself, saying, "Hero my ass." So post-intro, we see Yuri instructing Joe, saying, "What I'm about to teach you is how you're going to survive and come back, not win. Don't even think about..."
I have to interject here, dude. Yeah. This Spyro from Mac is, like, deeply personal and painful for me. Like, it was so hard watching him spiral down because he's just such a good fucking person. Like, I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, no problem.
Oh, yeah. No, my favorite part of the episode, and one of my favorite in the series, happens with this towards the end of this episode in particular. But yeah, we gotta move it.
Yeah. So again, Yuri gives him the instruction to Joe. I'm gonna teach you how to survive and come back, not to win against Mac. He says, don't even think of going punch for punch with him. Concentrate on defense. So next we see Oicho and Abahachi and Sachio deliberate over Chief's gear. Because, I mean, obviously just looking at it, it's way too big and unwieldy for Joe to use. But Sachio says they'll rebuild it to match Joe's build and strength and give it a wider range of motion, something more suitable for him. So Sachio proposes deerskin over the leather covering that Chief's gear has, as it'll be better to keep up with Joe's moves while still being sturdy and soft. So I like this detail they put in. Like, it shows how these characters are invested personally in this match, their hand in making Joe a more effective fighter, and
I think this
showing
also
how they want to protect him and what they can do.
I was going to butt in. Like, this is important leading off of their consenting to this match, because all of them have their own part in supporting him through this. Sachio and Oicho with revamping his gear. I mean, like, each of them are supporting them in their own ways. I just feel like it's a small little detail, I think, but I think it's very powerful.
Exactly. So Tomoka in the next scene, she looks over the data again, over the BES data, recounting what Mikio said about growth through error. When Sakuma drops in to spew more of his bullshit about future and progress, and then Tomoka asks Sakuma, will Mac come back? Because we can infer Mac maybe has gone off for a few days, like no one probably knows where he is. Because we can see, the next time we see him, you know, he's grown quite a bit of facial hair, and I'll get more into the explanation there. But he's clearly been gone for a bit. So she asks, will Mac come back? And then Sakuma says, you need either pleasure or fear to drive people. And then he says, Mac lost everything once. He knows that fear very well. Think he's brave enough to lose it all again? And then I think this is the final straw for Tomoka, because at this point she can clearly see oh wait, all of you waxing poetic about, growing and giving a better future to humanity is all meaningless because you can't even treat the people around you like human beings. Like, it's all in service of this idea you have in your head that isn't actually about helping people. It's about bringing glory to this idea and your own realization of that idea. Like, how do I say this? There's no actual human interest in the expression of that idea. It's all lip service towards his ambition, is what I'm trying to say. So,
yeah,
like,
I feel like
that's what he tells himself, but what he really wants is satisfying his ego, I guess.
Yeah, I think
and his legacy. Yeah,
I think one way to look at this, most of the cast of this series looks to each other and other sources for their own inspiration to fulfill their dream. It's what Chief did. It's what Mac is currently going through. Sakuma has chosen the unfortunate path of fulfilling his dream and seeking it out through his own means and looking to himself to fulfill that dream. And that ultimately does not end in his favor, but I think that's one of the biggest contrasts to those around him. Everyone else allows the dreams and others to inspire them fulfilling their own.
And he appropriates other people's dreams to further his own. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
And like he made that comment, like, "Are you gonna jump like all these young people?" And I'm sitting there thinking to myself,
just his
like,
callous...
you should jump, you piece of shit.
Yeah, just
like
his
jump.
Fucking definitely. Like, that's
all these young people are just despairing and jumping off buildings and killing themselves. Are you gonna jump too? Like,
yeah,
the
way he just offhandedly says it, he's like,
right?
Oh, what? You gonna fucking jump too? I'm like, Jesus Christ, dude. You could not be any more of a piece of shit. Jeez.
Exactly. God damn it. Like, I hate him so much. So much.
I'll end it with this. The worst part of it is a lot of antagonist figures you can usually accept or brush aside because there's usually a comical effect to their villainy, whether it's overblown or it's played up.
Human.
Yes, it's very
right. Well, and
it's very down to earth and unexaggerated, and that's frightening.
Even at that, there's like, at least for like most villains, like you have some sort of like empathizing view with them. Like, I understand where they're coming from, but with this motherfucker, like, he's just so detached and so above everybody else. Like, we as common peasants, just there's no understanding of his point of view, and the only thing that I get from him, and I'm sure that both of you get from him as well, is that he's just a fucking piece of shit. Like, he is a detriment to society.
Oh yeah, I think we drove that home.
I mean, he keeps talking about progress through what BES will bring to society, but his first inclination is to use it towards military contractors and people who will essentially pay top dollar, but the populace at large is not going to see any tangible benefits from it for a very long time.
Exactly.
Not until the human cost has been thoroughly squeezed out of it, like in the military industrial complex. So, like, really all that bullshit he's spewing is just in service of profit and exploitation, and but we do need to move on. But yes,
okay, audience, moral of the story is fuck you, Sakuma.
Yeah, and everything he represents, because he does represent a very real, relevant presence in our current world. So yeah. Anyways, next we see Maya looking over the Shorado and So she's looking over the Shorado company card that Asamoto gave her, the contact info. And then we see her putting Miguel to bed. She's thinking about contacting Asamoto. And then she thinks back to an unspecified time of Mac lying in a hospital bed, saying, "Look at the real me. I can't even take a drink without your help." I'm assuming for whatever reason his gears or his BES or whatever were deactivated at that moment, so he can move. So we see him lying on the table. He says, "I can't even take a drink without your help." And he thanks Maya for all her help. And next we see Mac lying in his car, disheveled and forlorn in his appearance. A cop approaches, asking why he's parked under the bridge, looking at various bottles of alcohol in the vehicle, asks for his ID while reaching for his handgun, and then is told to stop by his partner, who says, no matter who we're dealing with, they live in this town just like us. We need to treat everyone with respect, don't we? And then this cop, who we learn is Hakeem, recognizes Mac, who Mac in turn calls him partner. So real quick, these last couple of short scenes, any thoughts there?
I think they play a very important role preceding this next scene, so I want to save it for that.
That's fine. No, I guess the reason I stopped there briefly was I thought it was interesting because so when Mac's lying in the bed, he mentioned about Sakuma giving him another chance to Megalobox, and I guess it's just interesting to see Mac with his gear deactivated. Like, the assumption is, it's just always on, he can always move now, but no, like, that shit needs to be turned on for him to even move. Like, without it, he's just stuck in place, I guess. So
yeah, I mean, his motor functions are next to immobilized.
He needs the artificial gears. He needs that induced electrical signal to even move himself. So in a very real way, he is in the hands of Roscoe. He's in the hands of Sakuma. Like, the unfortunate reality is he can't live without that gear now. So
right.
And I feel like that's part of the reason.
And it just fucking sucks because, like, God damn it, Mac is such a good dude.
Yeah, and
and
I feel like that's part of the reason why he sees himself like he's a sham, is because, well, I'm no hero. I like, the only reason I rose to this point is because I've been given this gear, I guess. Like, it's not me, it's the chip, basically, because, he thinks of Mac time as, oh wait, this is just my brain going haywire from the chip. So I'm able to just put everything aside and go ham. But I mean, that's just my take, kind of, that's my reading of the situation. But again, moving on. Next, we see Mac speaking to the two officers, discussing their inspiration in him. He believes if he had died back there, referring to when he got in the shootout, which caused him to be paralyzed, he'd actually be a hero. But then he thinks of his wife and daughter in this moment. And then a stranger nearby in the park they're at begins playing the guitar theme to the show that we're all very familiar with at this point as the outro music. And then the vocals kick in to a montage sequence of Mac's life as an immigrant, then as a megaloboxer, then as an officer, and then finally as a family man. And then we see Mac realize here what all he still has, and that even if the conditions were not ideal, that he has not lost everything. And he truly recognizes in this moment that he needs to go back home to his family. And so, to the narration I'm speaking of here. The Nomad buried the hummingbird on the side of the road and sung the hummingbird's song as if to mourn its loss. So when confronting the ocean for his wish, the Nomad is asked if they wish for money, fame, or death. The Nomad responds with, "I once had everything, so I desire none of these things. I just want to be shown the way back home." So Mac comes back home and tells Maya he would have done the same in her situation. You saved Miguel's life when I could do nothing.
Well, and
then stating, I have lost...
Quick.
No, I'm ending right here. Then he states, I have lost nothing. So ending that scene. So yes, now give your thoughts. Sorry.
Okay, yeah, sorry. Yeah, on Mac's way home, it was literally the hummingbird hanging off the rearview mirror.
Mm-hmm.
So again, another motif of guiding him home, which was very resonant with the entire motif of this entire series, or this entire season.
So I may or may not have cried like a bitch during this scene.
Same.
Oh, dude. No, this was the point where I'm like, all right, yeah, I love this.
Yeah,
This entire sequence destroyed me.
It's
like
tough to even
I had
think
to
about right now, to be honest, for me.
Yeah, I'm struggling to articulate my thoughts because I have so much I want to say, but to consolidate my feelings. I mean, Mac is the Nomad in this scenario.
Mm-hmm.
He reflected, and like the Nomad realized he didn't lose everything. He is once again understands what all he has. Instead of throwing it away, he's returning to it.
We also get like a really important theme of bad things only happen so that good things can.
Yeah. And
so that kind of gives us as a viewer like some sort of hope. Like maybe like I'm crossing both of my fingers, some sort of hope for episode 13, our final episode, but like, man, I really don't want to hold my breath because I'm so invested in this story. Like, I'm so emotionally invested. I don't want you to just give me this hope and like rip the rug from underneath me. Like, God damn it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that statement that I believe he said his grandmother told him when he was young, like, bad things only happen so that good things may, definitely paints a picture in our heads of how he approaches life, how his cultural heritage has informed how he's moved along in life. And we can guess that his early life, his time as an immigrant, were probably really, really rough.
Right.
But he moved through it, and I mean, then Sorry. No, go ahead.
Before we finish this episode, I do want to call attention to a particular scene with Sashio sitting on the train tracks, overlooking the cityscape, which is like 190% screen like background. Like should be your screensaver, should be your background. It's a huge callback to the first season with Sashio sitting on the train tracks. With the low key like jazz music going on.
Yeah, I thought Megalobox.
What a fantastic fucking scene!
I thought season 1, episode 1 had the same shot.
I think it did. I would have to go back and rewatch it, but like it is a huge callback to season 1. There was a shot in season 1 at some point with Sashio sitting on the tracks.
And are you talking about right at the end of this episode, right before the credits?
Yeah, okay. Right before the big night, essentially.
Got it. Right. So, getting right to the end. So, after Max says that, Tomoka arrives at the university to meet with Mikio, as we see, while we next see Mac telling Sakuma he's going to fight Joe, but in his own way. And to my recollection, Sakuma ends off this scene with an adios amigo, and I'm just like, oh, fuck you.
Yeah.
Man. Okay. Anyways, we need to get to the next episode. So before that, Joe and Yuri, they talk by the river, sunset going, with Yuri saying Ryu will begin physical therapy soon. And then he never imagined he'd be speaking with Joe here again. And he reiterates the sentiment that Joe has always given everyone hope and that he better not die. So again, reinforcing this idea that Joe is just this icon of hope that motivates everyone to be better in the end. So everyone gathers at the ring at the very end of the episode to spectate the final match as it's about to begin, and we see Sakuma surprised to see a certain face, and then both fighters enter the ring. So real quickly, any thoughts on this episode as a whole before we move on to the final episode?
Gosh, this might be my favorite, either my favorite or second favorite episode.
It was so necessary to Mac's character. Like, it was, Mac needed this episode so bad.
This would not have been the same ending or emotional like climax if we did not have this for Mac.
Mm-hmm.
Gosh,
it was such a rough episode
so
at the start to watch for Mac and watch his like downward spiral and his like loss of hope until he got that guiding star to go back home and be like, yeah, no, like I was the one in the wrong here. Like what you did is something that I would have done.
I just love that Mac. He had to look within himself for that to find that path again.
Well,
right. But we just get the point. It just reiterates the point where Mac is just a good fucking person, which just immediately like reinforces and makes me feel better about myself sitting there stating like, within the first few episodes, like I really want to believe that Mac is a good person. And literally just reinforces that belief to that he is legitimately a good person that is just in shitty fucking circumstances and has shit that he does not have any sort of control over, but he's still trying to be better about it. And the fact, even though he says adios amigo, fuck Sakuma, like Max straight up still defied him, saying that I'm gonna do this my own way. Like I'm not gonna fight using Mac time, essentially. Like I'm gonna do this in my own way as a last line in the sand defiance to Roscoe. So again, it just cements my belief in Mac. And like, as much as I love Joe, because I do love Joe, but like Mac is just as much as a protagonist within this season as Joe is.
For sure. All right, so moving on to episode 13, we open with Marla and Mio again, the mother and her son from the first, I want to say from episodes 2, 3, and 4 in Casa. So they're gathering with the others at Casa to watch the match, and they notice Chief's gear on Joe. So we see Yukiko next confronting Sakuma, saying that they've both been blinded by inconvenient truths, not realizing it'd end up in retaliation from ourselves. And I think you're really only talking about yourself there, Yukiko, but I respect your trying to level the playing field here. And just quick disclaimer, this episode's like rapid fire, scene by scene. Like it's a bunch of little scenes peppered in between the main fight. So we're going to be moving kind of quick here. So Mac notices the hummingbird on Joe's gear, while Joe says it was a prized possession of a man who lived out his dreams. And Mac makes the insightful statement. Yeah, he says he must have crossed the sea too. So we see from the pundits or the announcers that both are outstanding outboxers, which I actually had to look up because I know nothing about boxing. And apparently this is someone who's really good at maintaining a gap and fights with faster, longer range punches. So apparently that's their fighting style. So we see a scene of Tomoka disclosing the altered Mac data to Yukiko and Asamoto, with Mikio explaining the situation to them. So Sakuma told her to delete the data, but she instead shared it with Mikio. So Yukiko and Sakuma then have a big scene where they're conversing over the situation, and has Sakuma stating that she perhaps falsified the data, talking about Tomoko. So she perhaps falsified the data to meet the conclusion that BES is faulty, though Yukiko turns the argument around to Sakuma himself, stating that he was in such a hurry to complete BES that he falsified another person's future to his own ends. And she's obviously referring to Mac here. So before the match, we learned that Mac worked a deal with Tomoko. So if his readings become too dangerous, they will call the match. So the bottom line is no Mac time. That's his personal condition to the fight. So Yukiko discloses to Sakuma as he taps with his foot, so tapping his foot in anxiety. This is something we see throughout this series. Sakuma, when he's in kind of an anxious moment or stressful moment, he'll tap his feet. So as she discloses to him that she will take Sakuma down, even at the cost of her own reputation and future. Before moving forward and getting to like the meat of the fight, what do you guys think of everything I just said? I know that's a lot.
Rob, you feeling that Sakuma energy coming crashing down on him yet?
Yes.
He's shitting his pants.
Yeah, no,
yeah.
I'm not shitting my pants. I'm fucking creaming my pants.
No, I'm talking about Sakuma
here. Oh, okay. I thought you were talking about me because gotta change the britches here on some justice boners because he's finally cornered. Fucking Sakuma is finally cornered, and he's like, I can't really snake or weasel my way out of this shit as the weasel shit that he is. So finally seeing him have some sort of like comeuppance with Yukiko, which again which again, having her come from season 1 as kind of like not a really good person into season 2, realizing that how she was progressing as an individual was not a great way, and confronting him about that, like, look, dude, like, I've been where you're at, and like the path that you're treading is not good, giving you those warnings, giving you that chance to, like, you know, step out of this shit, and the fact that he's not doing it, and having her come up and just be like, well, no, I'm just gonna knock your dick in the dirt, fuck you. I'm like, yes, let's go.
So the one type of person he's not used to manipulating or having a one-up on, so he does not have to deal with ideologues, which is essentially what Yukiko has become. It's not very often you see someone with her amount of power who has a roughly equal footing to someone like him who has such an ideological core to their motivations. And it's especially unprecedented being someone who's directly involved and is joined at the hip in their own business. So really, all of his threats don't mean shit to her because she's ready to go down with the ship. He has no more cards to play that can work against her in this situation. And that is why he's shitting his pants.
Yep.
Because she's fully ready to go down with the ship in order to stay true to her values. So, next, Mac nearly lands a knockout blow against Joe. To me, it clearly would have been an uppercut, but it misses. However, this shocks him, and he's down anyways because he's feeling the ringing. He's like out of sorts. The count reaches 9, but we see Sachio screaming for him to get up. Joe manages to get up, recompose himself. And next we see Yukiko acknowledge that, again, she's in the same position as Sakuma and will just simply have to take responsibility for what's happened. Because, as I believe she says later, she's embarrassed at her lack of judgment in thinking that Sakuma was responsible or shared her vision on some level. So Sakuma says that they both believed in giving hope, but Yukiko says she believes in humanity, something she cannot abide in Sakuma, as he's toyed with another's life for his own ends. But in the end says the BES system itself is innocent, and she gives Sakuma an out by making the BES license public. So if he makes the BES license public, then she will not disclose the terrible things he did to Mac. So, I mean, that's kind of the end of that exchange. Next, we see Joe downing Mac with his own blow, and it looks like he's about to go into Mac time with Mac. But then he remembers that so long as he remembers his family, he'll be able to keep hold of himself. And we kind of see that image again of the hummingbird being cast against the black background. You know, the hummingbird's like this vision of light to him. So Mac begins turning the tables on Joe, and we come to learn that Mac time, however, in this moment isn't involved. Both of them begin trading punches as Joe starts to see Mac as chief in his own vision, and then remembers the dog in the road he thought was dead, but then it gets up and walks away. So both of these guys are basically tripping balls in this fight and seeing a lot of visions while fighting each other. Like, they're having a spiritual moment here.
I was gonna say, like, to an outsider, like without context, they're going like batshit hallucinations here.
No, but it's like the most cathartic moments of their lives, basically happening right now.
Yes, so good.
So, but then Sachio right here, he recognizes what Joe is doing. They're in full punch trading mode at this point, and he realizes what's going on. He knows Joe doesn't want to stop and he wants to keep going. But this is when he realizes, as of almost...
that was part of his deal with helping Joe, is that I get to call it. Like, if it's too bad, I'm calling it. I will throw the towel in. I don't want to hear anything. Mm-hmm. And then you get that scene with a hand on Sachio.
As like almost guided by Nanbu. He throws
it was Nabu's hand, dude, and like I'm emotional just even thinking about that scene. Like,
yeah, but he does throw in the towel for Joe's sake because he wants Joe to come back from this fight, you know, to be able to be there for everyone else as family. So Sachio felt it was Pops telling him to stop, and Joe says it was. and both he and Mac exchange a contented look at the end. Before we move on to the final scenes of the episode, any thoughts on how this whole fight played out in the verbal fight between Sakuma and Yukiko?
So in the fight itself, honestly, I wasn't expecting Joe to lose. Not gonna lie, like he's quote unquote like the main protagonist of
before episode 12
series.
I would have agreed with you, but after seeing episode 12 and how that played out,
okay, so
it made
we got
way more sense to me.
We got a whole lot of like death flags, so I figured that Joe might have won, but at the cost of his life. But
then the emotional payoff wouldn't have been as
it would have been Rob.
It would have been living up to the original's legacy, but this series has been all about redemption and protecting what you've once lost, reclaiming what was once lost and protecting it. So
I'm glad that Joe didn't die.
Me too. So I'll give my final thoughts at the end of the episode about what I think of the series, but no, I love this fight. Both of these men entered the ring on their own terms, all with the intention to protect what they've gained and resolve to walk away, even if it means losing the fight. Because honestly, they both won before even entering the ring.
Yes.
Yeah. And I'll get way more into it at the end. But that's what I wanted to say on that. Honestly, throughout this entire show, the fights themselves have taken the backseat to the drama, but I cannot be happier for that. Like, honestly.
Oh, me too.
Agreed.
Like, it was kind of the reverse in the first season of Megalobox, which it was entertaining in its own way.
Yeah.
But man, I can't imagine having Nomad without the character drama.
It's immaculate.
It's so good.
So let's get to the final scenes of the episode. We see Yukiko holding a press conference after, so I want to say 1 or 2 days after the fight. We see her at the conference after apparently outing Sakuma's scandal, as we see him angrily retreating from the situation, while she states to the world that they will be opening up the license to the brain chip and the gear technology. So she emphasizes the achievement and miracle of Mac despite how he was used, and states people cannot move forward without hope. But we actually feel like this statement is earned when she's saying this and not when Sakuma's appropriating it. So we learn afterwards that Sakuma is arrested for being accused of falsifying data to conceal evidence and for aggravated breach of trust. And then we get a final scene of Yukiko speaking to Asamoto, grateful that Asamoto accepted the position of CEO despite the myriad challenges that she made for Shirado by doing all of this. But as we, the audience, know at this point, Asamoto became president of Shirado and she stepped down from that position. So real quick, what did you guys think of the conclusion of that whole ordeal? Like,
so
I thought it was personally hilarious that she gave Sakuma an out earlier in the episode by saying, I won't disclose to the public what happened. You just have to make everything, you have to license this to the public. But she clearly went back on that and somehow worked it out.
Well, hold on. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Over.
No, correct me if I'm wrong.
Of course.
Isn't Tomoko having that falsified data and Tomoko giving it to Yukiko's brother Mikia? He's the one with the proof of that falsified data. He's the one who publishes it.
I see what you're saying. She wasn't the one that did it. He did it.
But her brother was.
Yeah.
No, he had the power of the press.
Of course.
I mean, either way, still.
No, that's a fair point that I managed to overlook at the end there. No, you're right. Yeah,
either way, Yukio's still told.
Well, either way, it's call an ambulance, but not for me.
Right, yeah. Fuck yes, he was arrested and
Well, she got the job. She apparently got him to sign over the license before that all happened. So, good on her.
What a ruthless person, and I am all about it. You go girl, queen.
So next we see a party for Sachio's acceptance to his new engineering job. Banjiri and Oicho wonder if Joe will be all right if they separate again, but Joe says, it's all right. This place will always be your home. You can always come back here. So next we see the younger orphans dropped off by Yukiko from the orphanage, one of the ones that Shirado runs. She's saying this is truly their home. And we next see Mio. So back at Casa, Mio, we see him carving a hummingbird in front of the grave for someone who we see. They have a title, El Gran Campeón. I don't know how you'd say that in Spanish, but apparently we know this person's name is Ignacio Martinez. So we have reason to believe that's Chief's name, Ignacio Martinez. Take that or leave it. That appears to be his name. So we finally see a scene of Mac and his family grilling happily in their backyard. Then one of Ryu in physical therapy at Yuri's gym. And then a short scene of Tomoka lecturing at the university to the students as Mikio looks on at her. And then finally we end the episode with Joe giving Sachio a ride to his new job as he waves goodbye to his friends and the orphans. And Joe drops Sachio kind of off in the countryside at this intersection, part of the way there, and he takes off on Joe's bike. Joe bids him farewell, and then we have the wonderful ending sequence of Joe as he begins driving to Chief's grave, because he did mention, I'm going to visit Chief's grave on the way. He hears Nanbu's voice, and he says, gonna get real lonely around here. And then we see a final cut of Nanbu having a drink in the back of the truck as he sees a hummingbird flutter by. And then end credits as Joe drives back towards the city. And that is Megalobox Nomad. So thoughts on the episode and the series as a whole from you guys?
You go first, Rob. I have to ponder.
Yeah, I gotta kind of collect my emotions here, because like even just explaining it, like I'm tearing up.
So are the dogs.
Yeah, sorry. Overall, like I was not expecting a happy ending. I thought that we were gonna have like a melancholic ending with either Joe or Mac passing. I'm honestly surprised and happy that we had a happy ending to our fairy tale. Essentially, overall thoughts of this entire series being season 1 to season 2 is I get major like Cowboy Bebop, Samurai Champloo vibes. It's really like a 90s era type anime, and it is literally like a 10 out of 10 for me. I cannot recommend it enough. It is it's some of the best of the best. It's a classic, and you need to watch it. Period.
Yeah. So before our recording, I had to deliberate myself. Any series that I would constitute a 10 out of 10, I had to deliberate with putting Nomad Megalobox 2 in that arena, because any show that I would consider a 10 out of 10 could be interpreted either as something I would immediately want to re-experience again from the beginning, or something that makes an irreplaceable like mark and impact on me, like something I will never forget. This show like scratches both of those. It checks both of those boxes. I consider this a 10 in my book. Like Rob was saying, this is a series very reminiscent of 90s anime with series such as Samurai Champloo and Bebop, but
Champloo's 2000s technically, but
right.
I understand what you're saying. It's more
right. It's that tone.
Yeah,
and
there's a grungier tone and aesthetic to it than is normal nowadays. I agree.
Yeah, but there's very few series that tells what this show does with such confidence, and it pulled. I mean, this is a boxing series, sure, but no pun intended, it doesn't hold any punches. Like, everything is raw, emotional, but man, it hits you right where it hurts, but there's such emotional catharsis, such weight and impact to what these characters go through, because they see a lot of very tragic events in their own ways and what they experience. But what I love about this as a sequel to the first series, I didn't expect this sequel series to exist, but I can't imagine it without it now. This has only made Megalobox, like both the first and the second season, I see this as a package now.
Yeah.
I can't ever imagine either of these without existing without the other. And
absolutely agree. I think season 2 retroactively makes season 1 much better, if I'm being honest.
yeah,
And I always
I
liked
have
season 1, but
yeah, me too. But man, I can't imagine experiencing the emotions and feelings I have with this one
we needed,
without.
yeah,
We
season,
needed the
yeah.
setup, the characters. Gosh, I'm fumbling so hard.
It's fun. No, you're good. Season 1 was necessary for the arcs to take place in season 2. And season 2 was such a perfect execution of these ideas. And I'm going to get into it. So, specifically, what my takeaways from this season was this is a story about redemption and preservation. So, the first series, despite not ending with Joe burning out in the end and dying, he achieved his dream at the cost of his life. That was a very resonant message in the Showa era of Japan. Like, that mentality was much more, again, resonant with the populace at the time. But since then, I feel fiction and media in general has taken on much more humanistic edge and is much more aware of the socio-political conditions that are common in this world, you know. And I feel the second season really embraced those ideas because, as we know, Joe did win in the end at the end of the first season, nearly at the cost of his life, but not so in the end. However, we see his fall from grace. We see him make all the wrong decisions, and he lost everything he had gained. But the one thing he did give that was enduring was his dream, and that lifted up other people, and it was those people that in turn lifted him back up. And I think the main takeaway from this season is that redemption is something that is earned and not given. Like, you have to earn redemption, and you have to fight tooth and nail from it, because ultimately forgiveness is something given to you by the people you've harmed. There's no amount of work you can do, no amount of sentiment you can give that can truly earn redemption. Redemption is something that is given to you by the people you've harmed. It's given through grace, essentially.
But you know what you can fight for? Preservation.
And yes, and once you've earned that redemption, you hold on to it. Joe could have not learned from his mistakes. He could have made all the same mistakes again, and he could have burned himself out. He very well could have won that match against Mac, but the unspoken implication is it would have been at the cost of his life at the very least, and at worst at the cost of both of their lives. And that's the true subversion of the second season. I mean, I say subversion in air quotes, but the subversion of the first season was merely that Joe was able to walk away after giving it all for his dream. But in this season, reflecting what true growth is and what a true journey to maturity is, it's something that is earned, and concessions have to be made for that. Like, yes, Joe probably could have won that match in the end, but he would have had to have thrown everything away to do it. When really, in the end, that's not what's important. What's important is preserving what he's gained by reclaiming his family. And it's as I said before, he and Mac already had won before the match even begun. Joe and Mac were doing this as an affirmation of what Joe's original journey was. It was not to win, it was not to win the match. It was to just have the match, is what I'm saying. But many people are calling out this final fight as an anticlimax, and it kind of is as a fight. But if we're talking about an emotional climax and what the show does to earn that emotional climax, I couldn't be more pleased and satisfied with the end of it. So
same. I'm in that camp.
Really, I have nothing. I only have the tiniest of nitpicks. Like, I guess my only nitpicks in the end are maybe it was just a little too clean. Maybe it's a little unbelievable for Mac and his former officer buddy to just suddenly be the one out in the ring with him. Like, again, though, that's super nitpicky. Like,
it could be, yeah. I could see that. Like, that's very
and yeah,
coincidental.
It's not like out of the question, but regardless, no, like I hate giving numerical ratings to things, but yeah, maybe if a gun were put to my head, maybe I would say this is a 10 season. Like, it was a damn great season of TV, of anime. Like, I couldn't be more pleased with how this show turned out in the end. I don't want any more. Like that.
No,
that was my thought at the end.
That
was my thought at the end of Megalobox season 1. I'm glad they went against my wish there, but really this time, please do not make a sequel season. It left off perfectly as is.
Yeah, I feel like any loose ends, I feel like if I knew there was to be any sequel to the original, I feel like any loose ends that would have made were tied up here. Yeah. I'm glad I've seen the rest of the journeys with these characters, and I am content and satisfied with leaving them where they are.
Definitely. And before I conclude the episode, I just want to say there's a great article on ANN, AnimeNewsNetwork.com. It's titled Discussing the Sociopolitics of Megalobox 2. And in this article, it's an interview with director Yo Moriyama and screenwriters Katsuhiko Manabe and Kensaku Kojima. They really dive into a lot of what motivated them to make the second season and what they were going for thematically in this season. I think there's a ton of great, insightful stuff to be found in this interview. It's by Lindsay Loveridge. It's a great article. Please check it out. But really, I think that's about all I have to say on this episode and the series as a whole. Any parting thoughts from you guys on this before we leave it there?
I'm filled with so many emotions. Like, it's hard to just express how grateful we are to like those who stick with us, because there are definitely moments like I feel like our covering of episodes 1 through 4 and this episode in particular, it's hard for me to articulate past the emotions that a series like this makes me feel. And that I hope that could speak more praise than any flavor text that I could give. Just if you want to experience a show that will strike just all the emotions, the tears, the anger, the everything,
yeah, I mean, really, that's the show we're seeking out ultimately every season. There's no shortage and abundance of shows that are focused on the plot, but there are far too shows that are focused on true emotional storytelling. And that's what Megalobox truly taps into on a level that is extremely rare. Let's just put it that way. And not only that, but gets the drama just pitch perfect. Like, it functions so well as just a great drama. Like, but yeah,
for sure.
With that, we're way over our typical time limit, but this is a 5-episode episode, and we really love this show, so it all good. So with that, I think that about does it. We'll have more news going forward with our coming episodes, a bit more information on what we'll be doing for the summer, and even possible changes to the format of the show. But with that, I think we'll wrap things up. So be sure to tune in for our discussion on episodes 9 through 11 of To Your Eternity. Feel free to
listen to it. You need to listen to it. Stop it. Like, you guys have, like, that's our lowest rated episodes. Listen to it, because you are not going to waste your time. To Your Eternity is worth your time. And if you don't listen to it, I'm going to send you to an education camp. You and your family, Cal.
You don't want to mess up the fuck off bear.
Yeah. If you don't listen to it, we're going to send the fuck off bear to you and your family cow. So you should it would behoove you to listen
anyway.
To it.
Fushi's too much of a teddy bear to do that, but feel free to give us a follow on our Twitter at 444pod, all 4s numerical, to receive any news or updates regarding the podcast. You can also feel free to email us at 444podc@gmail.com. That's all 4s numerical, pod letters c@gmail.com, with any questions you would like featured on a future episode. If you like what we're doing with the podcast, we would love it if you could like, comment, and subscribe on your platform of choice. Perhaps give us a review, as this really helps us gain further traction and visibility. With that, thank you for joining us today, and we hope you'll have a great week and join us next time as we discuss the next round of episodes for To Your Eternity. Have a good one, everyone.
Take care.